Broadcasting from Millennium Student Center at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and online at umslradio.org. We are the voice of UMSL. We are UMSL Radio.
The opinions expressed on this program are the views of the host and not necessarily the views of the University of Missouri St. Louis or this station.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of That Science and Nature Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Howard, and joining me this week, as always, Becky and Webster.
How's it going?
As well as Webster Heffern. Hi, everyone. We also have a guest joining us this week. Joining us in the fourth chair, John Bender. John, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So, John, this is your first time on the show. Can you give the listenership a little overview of who you are here at UMSL?
Yeah, I'm a third-year PhD student here at UMSL in the Parker Lab. My work is out in the Mariana Islands in Guam. I'm a St. Louis Zoo and Harris Center Fellow here at UMSL.
Okay. And generally speaking, what do you do for your research?
Yeah, so my research is basically twofold. I do species translocations, and I do ecological restorations of islands that have been invaded by either invasive species, habitat degradation, anthropogenic change, all sorts of things like that.
Cool. You get to travel a lot for your stuff. I'm a little jealous on that front.
Yeah, the traveling's, it's good and bad. You get a lot of travel points, credit card points, but you're sitting on 14-hour flights to Japan every now and then.
You can just get out of the airport and go to Japan for a little bit on the way over.
Yeah, I usually get like a 2-hour layover there. There's showers, and the airport's really great. There's fun like cookies and chocolates and things you can buy and bring back to people. So it's a better airport than a lot of the airports here in the States.
Okay, cool. We're glad you're here with us. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk all about bacteria that are vampires. We're going to talk about a potential panacea vaccine of sorts and nature getting royalties in the news. Topic of the show this week is going to be about zoos, what they are, why they're important, so on and so forth. And then we'll do outside of science as we always do. But jumping right in, our first story this week comes to us from Gizmodo, and this is all about dangerous bacteria that are actively seeking out human blood as science are discovering. So researchers at Washington State University basically are researching these bacteria for a couple different strains. So we have your E. coli, we have your Salmonella enterica, and we have your Chitrobacter coceri. This is probably the only times I'm going to say all that. And they're basically looking at these bacteria that cause intestinal bleeding and what's called bacteremia, which basically means the bacteria are getting out of where they're infected and into the bloodstream, causing a whole host of problems, particularly sepsis, which is like a fever-like condition from the infection of the blood. And they basically took these bacteria from infected patients and put them in this sort of unit and put human blood serum on like the arena area and basically looked at what the bacteria did. And they basically found within a minute the bacteria are able to like identify this is blood and then go after it and consume it. So that's a little scary, but I don't think it's as scary in the sense that like everyone's suddenly going to get infected with like blood-sucking bacteria.
I mean, I think it's now finally useful knowledge that not only are these bacteria ending up in these places, but it's happening by a specific process. We call this chemotaxis when an organism, when a single cell is just attracted in a direction of a chemical gradient. And I think this can actually be useful knowledge. The scientists at the end suggested this could be useful knowledge in terms of it's a process that we can now block, so we can prevent a lot of the infections that are currently happening. But I think it could even be wielded. We could misguide the bacteria where to go if they know which amino acid they're chasing after. Let's accidentally steer them to somewhere where they're going to get killed.
Question, like micro question for you, Webster. And you might not know it, you might say, I have no idea. So if these bacteria are super into like chemotaxic towards amino acids in blood and serum and all that good stuff, when you get like an open wound, it seems to me that sepsis ought to be much more common.
Except for the pressure aspect. So when you have when you have an open wound, fortunately our bloodstream is designed, and if it weren't designed this way, we would all be dead and our race would be no more. It is designed so that when you have an open wound, there is a whole lot of pressure going outwards from the wound, and getting anything into that wound is extremely difficult. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to start an IV here, but
with like I've helped with animals at a vet office.
Yeah, but creating a large enough puncture where you can actually get pressure going that other way it's not an easy task.
Nope.
It's and so fortunately, with an open wound, the probability that one of those single cells is going to swim upstream far enough, fast enough to get inside of that bloodstream is practically zilch.
That makes me feel better.
So, from this article, these blood-sucking bacteria, these are a subset of all the E. coli's and so on and so forth. Yes? I'm looking at you, Webster, again.
These bacteria? Wait, so you're asking about the three different strains that they used? Or?
Yeah, like it's not every E. coli, every salmonella. It's just a small subset.
Strains. These are the strains that have been found to cause these infections, and they found that the strains that are found to cause these infections happen to be chemotaxic towards blood.
Okay, because there are good E. coli bacteria, yes?
Yes, in fact, the part of your gut called the cecum tends to accumulate oxygen because we swallow air. And were it not for the E. coli there would be too much oxygen in your intestines, and a lot of the other wonderful microflora we have there that help us digest food, etc., would not be able to survive. Okay. So E. coli are kind of, they clean the air, so to speak, so the other bacteria can survive in our guts.
Okay. And I'm just curious, like, where would we pick up these blood-sucking bacteria from? It's just infected individuals? Like, where would the infected individuals get said bacteria? I'm sort of like, where do these bacteria hang out that people would get them from in the first place? The vampire blood-sucking ones.
Oh, I'm guessing these are foodborne. They happen to be mutant strains that one person happened to evolve accidentally. Somehow it infected some food, and now it's spreading around, and it's spreading well because in causing these infections, there are now larger populations of them to continue spreading. I wouldn't know beyond that kind of generalized evolutionary explanation where they necessarily originally came from.
Yeah. Plus anything with horizontal gene transfer.
That's true. Yeah. So
and what's horizontal gene transfer, Becky?
I'm going to slaughter it, but basically there are some organisms that can trade genes. So like for humans, the only way I can give my genes to someone else would be to reproduce and have kids. But if we were capable of horizontal gene transfer, I could be like, here, Webster, would you like an allele for chemotaxis towards blood?
And I would say, yes, I love that.
And then we could go on and give people sepsis. But is that what you were looking for, Jeremy?
Actually, I think that was a pretty
it's like a superpower that you
passing genes around between the bacteria rather than from father to son. It's going from friend to friend.
I was laughing at the fact that you're like, we can give people sepsis. Like that was the thing we're going to like use for horizontal gene transfer, as opposed to like immunity to something or some other beneficial thing.
Well, we're pretending to be vampire bacteria today.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on to our next story. This comes to us from Futurism, and apparently there is potentially a new vaccine that could protect against any strain of virus with just one shot. So these are a different group of researchers, this time at the University of California in Riverside, and they're basically looking into this RNA vaccine, which supposedly might be some sort of universal shot and might be able to protect you against a bunch of different type of viruses. So typically, and I might botch this, so Webster, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the way a general vaccine works is that you get injected with a dead version of a virus or a version of a virus that's been modified so it's weakened, so it can't like actually infect you and make you sick. And from that, your body is able to produce T cells and B memory cells as part of your immune system that will fight off new times the body encounters that virus. So like during cold and flu season, you get your flu shot, you get a weakened or dead version of the flu, and then if you encounter the flu or get it, inside of you, the body knows, oh, I've seen that before, I know what it looks like, I can kill it, so you don't get horribly infected. That's the general gist.
So good, yeah.
Okay. And then what the researchers are doing is, that's sort of the traditional version of a vaccine. What they're doing now is trying to make a vaccine which involves RNA molecules or silencing RNA molecules, because what they're finding is with viruses, they can sort of hijack the cell's machinery, which your cells have RNA, which produce proteins. And if they can kind of hijack the RNA machinery, they can control and do a lot of bad things to your body. So the vaccine will prevent the viruses from messing with the RNA, is my understanding of how this, at the surface level.
Yeah, it was like they were using RNA interference to prevent the viruses from hijacking the machine. I believe that's an accurate reading. I can flip back through that really quickly right now, but that sounds...
It gets more specific, but I feel less confident the more specific I will get.
Let's see here. So, there's an RNA can replicate to some level.
So
I see. We'll go on, Becky.
yeah, and maybe you can correct me here. It's almost like they're doing something to cause the viruses to mutate so that they can't circumvent the RNAi.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. So Jeremy and I were both totally off.
Microbe master Becky and O'Neill.
No.
So yeah, they have mutated the virus. So usually the virus will suppress our RNAi response. We will use kind of antisense RNA against certain things that are that the virus would use to attack us. The virus normally suppresses that. So viruses have a whole host of warfare going on, and one of them is to suppress the RNAi that we usually use to suppress them. We are preventing them from suppressing that RNAi. So as soon as they get into a cell, they're already incapacitated. That RNAi that we produce is going to be able to take them out.
I like it. It's like sugar in the gas tank, but for viruses.
Yeah, and the idea being that all viruses utilize this pathway that Becky just described, so you don't necessarily need to target a specific virus, you can just target this pathway, and in theory all viruses go through this, so if we just get the pathway right, we can apply this to lots of different viruses, is the claim the article's making.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's not going to be one shot and you're suddenly resistant to flu and COVID and this and that. It's going to be one generalized technique that can be applied to any virus. So you knock out the same sort of gene in every single virus, or you mutate the same sort of gene in every virus, and then you get this one shot for that virus, and then mutate it in another virus, one shot for that virus, and it's going to be a long-term effective thing because we're able to give an almost fully alive virus and still have the body develop an effective immune response and not get sick.
Right.
And it sounds like it would be really fast and to ramp up each time we encounter a new virus.
Yes, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Yes. So like as soon as we isolate COVID-25, we would be able to have that vaccine ready as soon as we can get that mutation into the virus and just start spreading it around to people.
How do we feel about, a sort of a one-shot vaccine? Like, if this was on the market next year, would we go for this, or would we still just want to piecemeal it out? Like, I get my COVID shot, I get my flu shot.
Oh no, you're still gonna have to piecemeal it out.
Okay.
Yeah. So if there actually were a one-shot vaccine where you didn't have to piece it out, I'd be horrified because...
Yeah, but I guess that was where I was going.
My immune system would overwhelm me. It would kill me in a process called... It's slipping my mind. There'd be a cytokine storm, and yeah. So you're still going to have to do one shot for each individual virus, and I'd be delighted to go get one of these shots. Sounds great. It sounds like it's not going to overproduce any particular protein in my blood. I'm not going to have any side effects. It's just going to make me immune, and I'm going to be done with it.
But every time there's a new strain of the virus, do we need to get a new vaccine for each strain? Or is the article saying that it's just...
Yeah, this is where I'm getting confused, because the one shot, people could misread this and think, I can take it one shot and never have to get any shots again.
You are going to still have to get a new shot every time there's a new strain. But one thing you'll remember with COVID was even that first round of shots, we each had to get like 2 to 3 shots, including boosters, that were all the same shot. That's not going to have to happen with this because it's going to be a live enough virus that your body's going to develop the right structure of immune response the first time around.
So then this would last like your whole life? Like you wouldn't have to get a shot 10 years later for, like stuff you get when you're a kid?
I'm sure you would, just because there's going to be a new strain 10 years later.
Right.
I thought they said something about 90 days in the beginning for the protection of the
90 days, that's not very long.
It wasn't very long. After just one shot, the mice are protected from the virus they were going after for 90 days.
Maybe that's a long time in a mouse lifetime.
That's true.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good point.
Yeah, I guess for humans, which one day they'll transition to human trials for that, but...
Well, and those mice had like messed up immune systems. They weren't normal mice.
Mm-hmm.
This weirdly, when I was reading this article, this reminded me like way back during COVID, the vaccines were rolling out, and there was a bunch of different brands. We had like Pfizer and AstraZeneca and stuff. Someone did a sketch on YouTube where they went and got like all 5 like of the major companies' vaccine, they got vaccine boosters from all the companies. And so the guy was like, wait, you got all 5? And then like he turns out he has like superpowers now because he got all 5 strains of the, so he could like force choke people and like throw them across the room. It was a funny sketch. But it was like, you didn't need to do that, but he did it anyway, and then he got superpowers. I thought that was funny.
So if you could roll this out, say tomorrow, would the companies, like, what do you think the viruses that would be targeted by the companies, and what viruses do you think, like, we should target? Like, should we go after Ebola right away, or is it not cost effective?
H1N1.
Oh, good one. Yeah. That's a great choice. And I think Ebola would also be yeah. And HIV, I'd appreciate it. That one's just been lurking around
since like
in
the 70s.
Shadows forever. Like, let's just finish it off.
Yeah. Probably would be good to finish off COVID too. Just kind of get that out of there with everything else.
Oh, that would be so nice. Nail in the coffin for HIV.
Just nobody would have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
and Ebola.
Do you think it would, going into the ecology mindset, open up a release for something else not named a virus to come in and start doing stuff to organisms if we got control of viruses like prions or something else come in? And I feel like something always takes the place of whatever leaves eventually.
Well,
nature abhors a vacuum.
What's really going to change is evolution itself. So much evolution has relied upon viruses. Like so much of our genome got there because of viruses and transposons and things that during any individual's life might not be that good for that individual, but as far as an evolutionary standpoint is concerned, have had a net positive effect on our species. You take out all the viruses and all the transposons and anything else that's going around mutating our DNA, evolution might, I'm not going to say it'll come to a halt, but it'll be very different.
Well, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I've always got the impression that I probably have a pretty big viral load. It's just not making me sick. So I don't need a vaccine for everything that I have or have been exposed to.
So
basically, she's saying like we have viruses inside us all the time, right? Even if we're not sick.
Yeah, there's some that just don't make us sick. So I don't know. Maybe they do play a positive role. I'm not.
Is that kind of why there was such a huge lag with the recent COVID vaccines when they rolled them out? Because you had a lot of people saying, I got the first shot, the second shot, the booster, a fourth booster. I've been sick with COVID a few times. Like, why do I have to get another shot? Because I feel like they rolled them out in October and there was a really low rate of people going to get them, they were saying. Just something like that possibly.
Maybe. No, I remember reading that with COVID, if you catch it naturally, that immunity starts to wane after, I want to say 90 days. So it doesn't stick with you as long as you would hope, any immunity. But no, I was thinking more like people who have had chickenpox but never get shingles. And it seems like herpes viruses are probably a good example of this, where they're just kind of hanging out and they don't necessarily make everybody sick.
And HIV even is a good example of that. And I think a lot of these envelope viruses that have latent reservoirs, some of them make people sick, some of them don't. They hang out. But having a vaccine against them would just be so useful, because that way you don't even need to worry if you're one of the people who gets sick.
Lots to think about. Sorry, I was looking forward to the next article. All right, so we're going to move on to the last article for the new segment, and this is from BBC, and this is all about nature officially becoming a musician, potentially earning royalties for environmental causes. So I'll admit, when I read this, I kind of thought this was a joke at first, but then I read on it's actually a real thing. So potentially, if artists being musicians, singers, those sorts of things, I'm not talking about like painters or sketch artists or things like that. If musical artists use if they use nature sounds in their songs, so things like birds chirping, cricket chirps, the wind blowing, waves crashing, anything sort of the natural world, incorporating to their music, they can now potentially, through Apple Music and Spotify, basically have a label as nature, along with whatever other genre, their music is like pop or rap or what have you. And if based on the number of streaming amounts, some of that revenue can actually go towards, environmental causes if you have this nature label on Spotify, Apple Music. So in sort of a way, the artist can kind of pay it back to nature in a way that like they are taking sounds and noises from the natural world and then using that in their music, and then so on and so forth. Or in turn, they can have people sort of pay it back in the long term, sort of for whatever environmental causes they want. So the charities were kind of broad, but it sounds like it can be things for conserving land, climate change, those sorts of things. So kind of cool that, there's kind of this little revenue stream potentially now for, environmental causes. What do we think about this?
I'm surprised nobody came up with this earlier.
Yeah.
It seems like a really good idea. We pay artists if we sample their music. We should pay the natural world if we sample its music. I can't tell you how many great. I listen to a lot of house music, and I can't tell you how many great house tracks are featuring all sorts of bugs chirping and rain falling and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess I always just thought about it as sort of like general stock noises. Like I've like made video or other like audio content. It's like, oh, I need this sound effect, like a bird chirping. I'll just go search bird chirping royalty-free sound effects and then use that. Or a dish breaking or whatever I need. So it's interesting to think about like an entity having ownership over it that I don't typically associate with that on an audio level.
Yeah, how do the artists, does it take away from the artist royalties, I presume?
I think it's like a small cut. So I don't know if the artists have control over I want X percent to go to nature, or it's based on, Apple and Spotify setting those amounts, or if they work something out with the organization they're being donated to. I'm not actually clear on the specific financials of it.
So it might be something that works better for bigger artists where their revenue isn't coming from Apple and Spotify. I mean, it's still good. Carry on. But it might be more of a big artist thing.
Right. I mean, this is from the UK because it's from BBC News, and most of the people they listed were, from the UK. So I didn't see like Taylor, if Taylor Swift did this would be like a huge upswing of environmental cause money. That would be pretty impressive. Because I thought I read the other day she's like $1 billion now. She's quite wealthy. But yeah, I think it's mostly UK artists in this article. They don't really list a lot of United States people.
Let's see. I don't know the credibility of this, but it says Spotify pays roughly 4 cents per 10 streams.
Okay.
Which means you need 1,000 streams to generate $4 in revenue.
Okay.
So if you're a newbie artist, you might not want to give up.
Yeah.
For whatever percentage, but if you're a big artist, that might be like nothing to be like, 1%, send it to the trees.
I think they also said that they're giving nature its own artist page, as it was an artist, and they'll have ambient sounds from all over the world, and 70% or something of that will go to conservation programs. So
that's cool.
If you can get people streaming rainfall while they're trying to sleep across the world, could add up quickly.
I use it when I write. I'll put on nature sounds.
Yeah, so
that sounds cool. I'm going to start doing that, knowing that it's going to raise money for the environment.
Yeah, I've definitely done the rainfall for sleeping. So has someone been to the nature Spotify page? Does someone want to look right now?
No, we can look.
Yeah, let's check it out.
All right.
Let's have a look.
I guess we'll vamp while you do this, while you find it.
I'm just going to punch in nature. Nature artist. All right, here it is. You can also, there's a GoFundMe link on here. The most popular stream has almost 1 million streams. So based on our $4 per 1,000, can anyone do the math on their head?
4,000?
That sounds about right.
So, yeah.
What is the most popular stream?
It says Victoria Thunderbeats. Would we be in violation of anything if I played?
I have no idea because nature can't claim copyright, so I think we'll be okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Becky's going to play the most popular song on nature.
It's rain.
It's rain.
Rain.
And thunder. That would be good for some writing. I'm telling you
Yes. Now I'm just imagining next week getting a cease and desist off Spotify. You used copyrighted music called Nature.
You played 2 seconds and encouraged people to visit the page.
Yeah, maybe their algorithm will somehow catch when you post this on Spotify. Their algorithm is just going to catch that little clip.
Yeah, catch 3 seconds of rain.
Well, that would be the most intriguing legal thing I've been involved in for a while.
Like someone's going to represent nature in court for money.
Well, they'd represent the museum or whoever it was
That's true.
running the page.
That's true. But conceptually, it's kind of funny.
I don't think anyone will come bother.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay.
Go listen to the sounds, save nature, get your writing done.
Absolutely. Or you use it to sleep, whatever you want for the ambient sounds.
No, you must write.
But what if they're not like writers? What if they're just getting off work at McDonald's?
Hey, who's to say McDonald's worker can't be a writer as well?
I'm just saying not everyone's a writer. I'm not saying they can't be a writer and they can't journal. I'm just saying not everyone writes.
I'm just adding pressure because we're all students.
Okay.
Well, I think everyone should write. I think it's very therapeutic, and doing it with thunder sounds awesome.
Yes. I concur with the using thunder sounds, but yeah, writing is good. Okay, we're going to segue out of this to a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk about zoos. Don't go anywhere.
Howdy folks, my name is Carson Howe. As a transfer student, I know the pride of UMSL is our student community. It's always been diverse, active, and welcoming to all. However, in the years after the pandemic, our Student Government Association has not been supporting our community to its fullest. As your student government president, alongside my colleagues in Triton Renewal, we will change that. Through servant leadership, we will connect and rebuild our community by bringing student voices back into the decision-making process and redesigning student government to focus on who matters most, you. So this Mirth Week, April 22nd through April 26th, vote in our UMSL SGA elections and vote for Triton Renewal. Carson Howe, Allie Davis, and Grace Desjardins. Go Tritons!
And we're back. And now it's time for Topic of the Show, where we talk about some pre-selected topics that I select in advance. This week, we're talking about zoos, what they are, why they're important, our experience with them, so on and so forth. So normally I start this off with a little like, what's the topic definition of whatever we're talking about? However, I did a little research this week, and I'm going to give you a little historical overview of zoos. I thought this would be nice. So, the first zoo, according to history, was all the way back in ancient Egypt in 3500 BCE. So they found remains of animals in a sort of a collected environment in a ancient city called, I'm going to botch the pronunciation of this, of Hierakonpolis. It's in Upper Egypt, and basically they found like baboons, tigers, bones of lots of different sort of exotic animals, and they weren't like gnawed or eaten at, so they know they didn't like consume these for food. They basically just found they're all collected in one place. However, they did find a lot of the animals were like had bones that were kind of like crushed or broken, implying that they did not have very good welfare, and they were possibly like abused or put in their place, I guess, by whoever owned them. Other examples of this in sort of ancient societies, we have ancient China. So Wang Wang was an emperor in 1060 BCE, and he basically had this, he basically had what was called the Garden of Intelligence, which had lots of sort of more, I guess, aesthetically pleasing animals that he liked, so like deer and birds and fish and so on and so forth. There was also King Henry I, who basically set up a menagerie in the royal estate in Oxfordshire, and that had lots of things like, more exotic for the time, like tigers and camels and lions and porcupines. So lots of sort of collections of animals by rulers sort of illustrating their like power. They're like, look, I have all of this authority and this power, and I can gather all these animals in one place. And people could potentially come and see them, but it wasn't always open to the public. It was kind of like a private sort of deal. Interestingly enough, the oldest continuous zoo, which means it's still running from the time it opened, is actually in Vienna. And this is I'm going to botch this pronunciation too, the Schönbrunn Zoo, and this opened in 1752, and it is still around today, which is pretty impressive because that's in Austria, and that had to go, Austria was in Europe, and with the world wars and everything, that's kind of impressive that it was still able to, survive through all that. The first zoo in the United States was in Philadelphia. So this opened on July 1st in 1874. And originally, fun fact, it was going to open 15 years earlier in 1859, but the Civil War delayed it by 15 years. So a lot of wars actually, in one case, a war causing problems, in another case, a war miraculously not closing or causing problems for a zoo. And to bring this in context for where we are, because we're in St. Louis, the St. Louis Zoo, this is a little weird because there's like multiple dates for this. The first exhibit of the St. Louis Zoo was established in 1904, and it was basically the city bought an exhibit for a flight cage to basically like put on display. And then officially, I guess more exhibits were bought and the zoo sort of became an official establishment in 1910. So the zoo is roughly like 110 to 115 years old, give or take. So kind of some cool facts there. And then I also want to talk about, there's also the American Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which is this nonprofit organization that looks at, or that basically accredits zoos and makes sure they're up to code in terms of management and welfare and education purposes and all that. And that was founded in 1924. So zoos have existed long before the establishment of the Association for Zoos and Aquariums. But those are some good little history tidbits on the overview of zoos. So now, to have me stop talking, I just wanted to start out our conversation today with your experience with zoos. You know, what has your experience been like? Have you just been to a lot of zoos? Have you worked there? That sort of thing. So whoever would like to start first.
I love going to the St. Louis Zoo. There's 3 attractions there that are just my total favorites. There's the Riverside, which has like the hippos and the elephants. There's the Big Cat Country, which has like all the obvious big cats, like lions, tigers, and my most recent time going there, one of the lions like roared, and it was so deep and so resonant. It was basically, it felt like the sound was probably going for hundreds of meters. It was very impressive, and so just to be able to experience that here in my hometown without actually going on a somewhat dangerous African safari, like. I've always found that cool. My third favorite spot is the butterfly house. That's very, very neat. As far as the welfare of the animals goes, I always feel a little bit guilty for appreciating it so much, because I'm sure they're not faring quite as well as they would in the wild, but I do think we do a pretty good job nowadays. Maybe somebody else has some other opinions on that.
I grew up going to Brookfield Zoo in Chicago and Lincoln Park and the Shedd Aquarium. That's because where my family's from. And getting older, I started working, like volunteering at local zoo/sanctuary in Idaho, and then learning more about animal behavior and animal welfare in captivity. And then I started working with lab animals, so it was a little different. And now I do research with the insectarium at the St. Louis Zoo, and I'm very much interested in monitoring welfare in animals that we don't usually think about. Like people, it's very easy to think about elephant welfare, but not as easy to think about coral or beetles or tarantulas. So that's been a big focus on my research is invertebrate welfare.
Yeah, I also grew up going to the Brookfield Zoo from Chicago. So I went to Lincoln Park Zoo once, but we were mainly in the suburbs, so we did a lot of Brookfield Zoo. My mom and my dad had me and 2 kids, so I think they got the Brookfield Zoo pass, and summers were just like bring them to the zoo and let 3 people run around. But I remember, I feel like I was there a lot when Brookfield Zoo was really having kind of a heyday, and they were building these tropics buildings and immersive exhibits well before a lot of the other zoos, I think, were doing it. So I remember being a kid and just walking into the swamp exhibit and just feeling like you were totally immersed into an environment that you had never been in before, kind of like what Webster was saying, or the tropics building, being able to go to 3 different rainforest type settings in this just enormous building, and the animals are just all over your head. And there's a lot of multi-species collections they had when I was a kid, which I think they were still kind of at the front of that, leading that drive.
Oh, I'd add one thing. I've been on the interpretive side, doing exhibits for zoos where we made the interpretive stuff. I did that as a job. And in doing that, I saw a couple sections of zoos go from the ground up and got to participate in the building process, not only from all the interpretive stuff I was doing, but listening to the engineers going over life support and designing and planning all the enclosures. So and then I've been to the AZA conference a couple times, the big one. So yeah, I've got some of that background too.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Talking with the engineers while they're doing that part of the process,
if it involves a big tank, usually engineers are going to be grumpy at some point. Life support for big tanks for things is really challenging and complex work.
Oh, speaking of big tanks, has anybody here ever been to an alligator and crocodile zoo?
Oh, I've never
Like a farm, kind of.
Oh
like
yeah, I guess they call them farm. I'm not sure what the right name for it is.
I haven't been to one. I guess I've seen them on TV.
Like, I don't know if what I went to was a farm so much as it was more of a zoo. And it reminded me of what John was saying though, with this immersive sort of exhibit where you feel like you're in the swamp or whatever. But that was really cool. I went to one of those in St. Augustine, Florida, and they had so many featured species of caiman and crocodilians. That was impressive because I'd never gotten to see so much variety. And again, I don't have to travel to go see it. I just get to see it here in the States, reasonably local.
Yeah, I've heard that's a very impressive institution. I think that was an alligator farm that, I could be wrong, that has now like transitioned to be a fully accredited AZA institution, but
That's
I've only heard what you're saying. Like,
Wow,
great
I didn't
things
know this
about
was as famous as it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a really neat place.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience with zoos, so I'm from the East Coast, from Virginia originally, and I know I've been to the Washington, D.C. Zoo at some point when I was a kid for a field trip for elementary school. That was so long ago, I don't remember much about what it was like, I know I've been there. And then I've been to the St. Louis Zoo, of course, because you kind of have to go there. It's free. Quick plug for the St. Louis Zoo. It's one of the best free things you can do in the city. Been to that zoo, and then and I've also been to the Animal Kingdom in Disney World, which I don't know if it's like technically an AZA zoo, but it is a collection of animals in a sort of theme park of sorts, so I'm kind of lumping that in there.
Sure.
Disney is a AZA accredited zoo, and they have a enormous Disney conservation fund that helps support a lot of they help support a lot of the work I was doing for a while. So
Nice.
And I will perpetuate some hot goss about Animal Kingdom, but I heard when they were first founded, so this is like when I was a kid, they raised their salaries higher than anybody else, and they got like all the best people to move there right when they founded it. That's the gossip.
I
about
never
how it
heard
started.
that, but I can see them doing that.
And then did they lower it after?
I was gonna say, and then they were crashing back down.
But Animal Kingdom, I'm just saying they have a good reputation in terms of animal care and all that.
Animal Kingdom is beautiful. I remember riding on there's like a train that you take.
Oh, yeah. Good times.
It's like a safari tram. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's cool.
childhood Jeremy had good times there. He really enjoyed that. That was my favorite of all the parks we went to, like MGM Studios and Epcot and all that. I love the Animal Kingdom. One day I'll go back there. But yeah, I've been to St. Louis Zoo. I feel like I've been to a couple other cities now, but I'll admit, like I'll do a city pass, but I won't go to the zoo because I'm like, not that it's bad, but I'm like, we have zoos in where I'm at. Like, it's not unique. Like, the zoo is important, but it's not unique to that area. Like, when I went to Chicago, it's like, I want to do, like, Chicago-specific things that are only there in Chicago or New York City versus, like, everywhere kind of has a zoo, which is I'll admit, a slight to the hard work they put on for that zoo for that city. But
Yeah, I'd recommend like San Diego Zoo if you're there. You
Yeah,
can visit
that's a
that.
great
I've never been to
White
California, so
tigers, don't they?
I think
I
a lot
remember
of
that.
places have white tigers.
I feel like if I go back to, like, Chicago or New York City, I'll definitely go to the zoos. But the first time there, I was like, okay, we have, like, 2 or 3 days. I want to see the specific stuff.
Yeah, and then Albuquerque Biopark, I'd recommend that one. I don't know if you've got other
No,
recommendations.
I haven't been to many zoos, but I kind of fall into the Jeremy style of travel. But when you do the AZA Association of Zoo and Aquarium conferences, they usually are hosted at a city with a zoo in it, and that zoo will do a zoo day where you go to the zoo in the host city, and they have basically been preparing for, a couple thousand zoo professionals to come invade and look at everything that they have with a microscope. But there's also food and drinks and music, and it's always fun to go see what the other zoos are doing. They get, prepared for the conference. They know they're going to be invaded with just these zoo professionals from around the world visiting their space. But I do like those days.
I got to do that in New Orleans and then in Atlanta. And it's a lot of fun to have a zoo or an aquarium just all to yourself and your best work buds and you're running around getting drinks. It's a very fun conference.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. I have been to the Omaha Zoo because when I visited my friend 3 years ago, he took me there. So that was a very, very nice zoo. You debated getting them, but just want to throw that one in there. So in terms of zoos, what kind of services do zoos provide besides just the animals? And also maybe as a sort of addendum to that, what kind of services should zoos provide for the public, generally speaking?
Yeah, so I think, I'll speak from St. Louis Zoo's point of view here because I've been working with them closely for a few years. But one of the biggest things they provide, I think, is conservation education, wildlife education, family activities. The St. Louis Zoo is free. It's the closest, like Webster was saying, that many of us, when we're young or maybe even a little older in life, can go and see all of the biodiversity that the world has to offer, that Missouri has to offer, wherever these zoos are in place. And it seems like zoos are really taking an initiative to have a community-driven mindset. How do we support the community we're in, the schools we're in, things like that. So I won't get too long-winded here, but I think that is something that zoos are really doing well at right now.
And I'd say in addition to educational and community-based programming, more and more zoos are pushing like real research programs and collaborations with universities. St. Louis Zoo is really good at that. They have like dedicated research staff. And that research can be anything from conservation anywhere in the world, where they're actually sending staff out to work on conservation projects, or supporting students like John. And also maintaining frozen zoos, if anyone's ever heard of that.
I have not.
So that's where you're keeping reproductive material and maybe embryos. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. But basically, for endangered species, you're having a cryo zoo with like sperm and ova and things like that.
That's a great idea. I didn't know they had those.
Yeah, so there's a much bigger push these days that zoos are not just entertainment, they're active research and education centers.
And they're also very good at, some of them are nonprofits, some of them are business. They're very good at exposing and getting a lot of funds that go towards frozen zoo conservation education. The zoos, from a financial standpoint, they plan things like family days, but they also look at the 20, 30 something year olds and they say, hey, let's do a brew at the zoo night or a wine night. And they are constantly doing lantern festivals, holiday festivals. All that money goes back into the community, helps support the conservation work, helps do these frozen zoo initiatives. And then from a veterinary, we haven't talked about veterinary side of things. A lot of zoo animals do get to live into geriatric ages. They live longer than they would in the wild. So a lot of the zoo veterinary research side of things is seeing how long organ systems last, what happens to animals when they get to certain ages. There's all different diverse set of aspects that zoos are kind of seeing and playing with and dipping their toes in.
That's good to hear that they do tend to live longer lives in the zoos. That's what you'd want to think, that they're not living a worse life than they would in the wild, or a shorter life especially. Have any of you ever been to Sichuan, China?
I've never been to China.
Giant pandas there. Oh. So my husband's from Sichuan province, so I got to travel there and got to go to Chengdu and see the giant pandas and the red pandas there. And I remember a couple years later, I was seeing something on the TV about a panda that had been taken to a zoo here, and the Chinese were very critical of the care that they were giving the panda here, and they eventually took the panda back to Sichuan. And do you guys know much about the different sorts of standards between different countries in terms of animal care? I was just surprised that China, of all places, would have more stringent animal care, but I guess when it comes to their prized giant pandas, they especially really know what they're doing.
Yeah, I'd also want to read the details of that, because that's something that could get hijacked by politics pretty quickly. Because I think any giant pandas anywhere in the world are all owned by China. There's no other country that has an independent breeding program or anything like that.
Yes, this was a panda that was on loan or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know the exact details of that, but I know how zoos kind of are internally built with the animal care teams, and you have a set of zookeepers, manager, curators looking over collections. So I don't know if in China they have a team of individuals just working on a few pandas, a team of 12 people for 2 pandas, and that might be the care that they want at AZA zoos. If an AZA institution had 1 panda, I think it would be hard to argue the budget funding for a team of 10 zookeepers, manager, and curator for a panda exhibit. I think they would probably roll it into a center or area of the zoo that they felt it fit best in for whatever story they're trying to tell the public, and then have that team of people manage it. But again, I don't know the details.
I see. So potentially be a much smaller team here for the animal. Also, I wonder, do any of you know anything about animals that are taken far from their home habitat? Obviously, we're going to have different species of bacteria and viruses floating around in our air here. Do the different microbial populations tend to have major impacts on the animal health?
They can.
Yeah, I don't know how much zoos are really going out into the classic thought of zoos going out into like the rainforest or the savannah and getting some animals and boxing them up and bringing them back to the zoo is pretty old. Most zoos are managing their own populations and their own diversity within those populations, and the animals that are from different parts of the world are captive bred and captive reared, and they're parent reared as much as they can be, but they're not from those parts of the world where those things are.
So they're adapted at this point.
I would say that they're adapted to North American or whatever is within their populations that they're dealing with.
I mean, I know there are some weird disease things that happen. There's a couple examples I can think of. So elephants can get tuberculosis. So I know most zoos at this point require a tuberculosis test before you're going to be anywhere in back of house. So you can get things like that and I know felids can get COVID from their keepers, and there's a lot of disease restrictions if you're working with great apes, because you can make them sick.
Oh yeah, I guess it makes sense that the ones that are most closely related to us are able to accept more of our diseases. Yeah.
And I know there's some rules about penguins in certain parts of the country and which ones can be outside and when, because I think it's mosquito-borne diseases. Yeah, I don't know if you know more.
Malaria.
You're the bird guy.
Yeah, I think it's malaria they're worried about. One of the things that I think zoos aren't moving animals around anymore, like across the globe, but the plants that are coming into these zoos are from all over the world all over these. So the plants will bring in pests or nematodes or something strange, and if a bird or something eats it out of the soil, it might get something and start passing that along to the collection. So while we're not, moving animals, we are definitely bringing plants from all over into our houses, zoos, offices, and those plants in the soil have a lot of stuff in them.
Huh. I mean, you remind me of there's that horrible disease that's killing is it the birch trees in Connecticut?
I'm not sure.
Some nematode that's just devouring some species of tree in Connecticut, and it's very sad. Like, I read an article, like, all these trees will die, and basically they will. And it made me think of like a frozen zoo, but doing that with the trees. Like, okay, it's eventually going to infect them, but maybe you can take some out right now that aren't infected yet, like save them, all the others die. And
there's programs like that for plants with herbariums and government organizations and things. So hopefully someone's got the Connecticut birch trees.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up, I guess I don't want to say the elephant in the room, because it's not necessarily like the most prominent thing, but there is somewhat opposition to zoos, and I think it's important to have a brief mention of this as part of the conversation about zoos and all of their practices with the AZA and conservation and their education missions. So in prepping for the show, I just found an op-ed piece, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, so don't bite my head off in your response. Just that the op-ed piece is from the New York Times, and basically the piece is saying that modern zoos aren't necessarily worth the moral cost. And a couple of things they cite in their article for reasons are things like, despite the zoos being AZA accredited and stuff, and they're promoting education, most people don't really go to zoos to be educated. They go to get out of the house, to take their kids to go do something. They're not really engaging with the education component enough. They also mentioned that a lot of the biodiversity stuff is kind of human dictated in terms of what's going to buy tickets, what are people going to come and see. There's kind of this this entertainment component of like, I want to be entertained when I'm there, so I want to see things that I want to see. And then one of the other things they list as well, it's just for like the conservation purposes, is that even if the animal is endangered, like what right do we have to rip it out of their environment and bring it to the zoo? Or kind of like to the big pieces. So again, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
I have a response to all three of these now. But I'll let you guys go too. Do you guys, either of you have anything that you...
Oh, I remember that article when it came out, and it was someone who just has a fundamentally different philosophy about conservation than I do that wrote it. But they also struck me as a person that hasn't worked closely with zoos and truly understands what they're doing and what it means. Because I have also worked with museums and what exactly infotainment is. Mm-hmm. So this just struck me as someone who really had an outsider perspective. And I suppose it's because of that, it's important to address their concerns because that means other people have them too. But also if you get into like a zoo career, you're going to find that those concerns are generally overstated.
I guess we already covered the third one, which was like taking the animals from the outside environment. Well, apparently we're not doing that so much anymore. These are captive bred, captive raised animals. With regards to the second one, I think it's a good thing that the zoos are featuring the popular species, because we talked about this in the fall, like umbrella species, the importance of having a species that everybody loves and is cuddly and is cute, that is exciting, where they're then more interested in saving that whole ecosystem because that's that organism's ecosystem. That's
also a thing that's just straight up not true. Like St. Louis Zoo has a American burying beetle breeding program. That's not a flagship. That's not a species that your average person is worried about.
So you're saying that there's more diversity there than just...
Yeah, they're investing money in things that aren't necessarily popular. San Diego Zoo is working with like Lord Howe stick insects. Has anyone even heard of them? So nope. It's like, that's a weird claim, but I don't know. John
yeah, I think, well, in a place like St. Louis, I can kind of see, so St. Louis Zoo, Wild Care Institute, they fund just an enormous amount of conservation across the world and in Missouri. So they can drum up a lot of work and funds and resources for things like Horn of Africa and things like that I think possibly allow centers like American burying beetle to not exist, but help them exist. If you can get even my conservation work, it's a small island, just small island birds. It's not the story is exciting, but they're not the most exciting species to work with. But if you have a St. Louis Zoo Conservation Center like the Wild Care Institute, I think they're really good at figuring out the budget and figuring out where to put resources and say like, hey, we have all this funds and resources coming in for things like African mammals, I forget the other things that they do, but that helps support the other smaller projects that other people want to focus on, like American box or Eastern box turtles in Missouri, burying beetles, Pacific Island birds, and they take a holistic view to conservation, which I really like. I think it's not umbrella species, but maybe like umbrella conservation. How do we attack everything with a finite amount of resources that we have?
Okay. Yeah, good.
And with regards to the first one, I just want to find out, did this person actually have statistics against?
I give them the broad overview of the article. I didn't want to get in like the super nitty gritty. They did cite some things. But
the people really weren't interested in education?
Just that like when people go to the zoo, well, that argument, it was kind of a mixed bag. So they give a general statement about most people are taking their kids out of the house, like kind of it's like a thing to go do. It's not like we're there for education. It's just like it's something to get my children out of the house or to get out or do something that's, low cost. And they also do cite, or maybe it was a different article, that most people are not really paying attention to the animals when they're at the zoo. They're talking or hanging out. So it's like there's like almost like it's just kind of a backdrop, like when you have music on the background when you're doing homework or something like that. That kind of analogy is what they were kind of alluding to.
Yeah, I think that zoos, not to jump back in, but I think zoos would not be shocked by any of that. And I think they know that people are going there to talk and to hang out. And I think they know that people are going there not to be educated. And they take those topics and they run with them. I think I've seen a lot of audience research departments and education departments have stats that say, you didn't come in to be educated today and you came in to talk and chit chat with your friends and you left and you learned this, this, and this. And you filled out our surveys and you said you learned 90% more than what you knew and came in on. So I think the stats, as Webster was saying, would be in the zoo's favor on that first thing.
Yeah, and like John was saying, there's active researchers that know the challenges of working with audiences in zoos, aquariums, and I would argue museums as well, that the main goal isn't education, it's a social outing, but how can we got this audience, let's take advantage of this and scientifically figure out how do we reach them.
Okay.
And to play devil's advocate on that, I think one thing that I wish zoos did better at is I think you could go to a zoo and walk around all day long and you could ask a person at the end of the day, what are 2 countries that this zoo does conservation work in, or what is one local conservation effort that this zoo does? And I think that maybe a lot of folks might have trouble answering that question. And zoos are doing so much conservation work, and they're teaming up with so many NGOs and universities and self-driven projects. I think if they could sell that more or show the signage more, then people would walk away from zoos saying, I was just at an institution that has its hands and fingers in 17 different places around the world and is doing good. I think they do an okay job. I think they could do a better job at it.
Okay. Real quick, as we wrap up this segment, is there anything the general lay people should know about zoos that you'd like to sort of instill as parting knowledge for this segment? What they should take away about zoos generally that maybe they don't know?
Say not all zoos are created equal. If you're getting bad vibes from a zoo, like the enclosures seem really tiny and the animals don't seem happy, you don't got to stay there. We have things like St. Louis Zoo with whole welfare departments, other places that are AZA accredited that do a really nice job. So yeah, just because you've seen one collection of animals that I would hesitate to call a zoo, maybe a roadside zoo, doesn't mean every place is like that. So especially for people that are zoo skeptic or a little unsure of what they're supporting. So there's a lot of good being done.
Nicely said. And with that, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with Outside of Science. Stay tuned.
Hey, 2024 graduate, are you a member of the LGBTQ plus community? If so, you are cordially invited to UMSL's Lavender Graduation Ceremony, a celebration of the achievements and journeys of our LGBTQ plus graduates. With roots in gay and trans student activism, UMSL's Lavender Graduation honors our graduates with a ceremony where they will also receive their rainbow cords and other celebratory gifts. This event is open to all LGBTQ plus students who will be graduating in May or December 2024. Bachelor's, master's, doctorate, or certificate, you're welcome to be recognized at our celebration. The Lavender graduation will be May 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. Location provided upon registration. Register by April 29th on Triton Connect.
Now we're back. And now it's time for Outside of Science, that segment of the show where we talk about, you guessed it, things outside of science to prove that we're in fact not robots that do work and research 24/7. So, what have we all been up to in the past week that we'd like to share? I know we're getting towards the end of the semester, and this is when all chaos breaks loose, so there's less time for fun activities and frivolities. But if you have anything that you've done.
I've been hunting morel mushrooms around our house and some of the parks around where we live over in Illinois. So
I did that too. I found 3.
Yeah. I think it's we got a little more than 3. We had a couple baskets full. But
nice.
I think conditions are really good this year. It's really wet and damp and cool still. So been morel mushroom hunting.
Nice. Is this something you do like every year, or did you just get into it?
I've been doing it for a few years now. If you like mushrooms, once you have some morels and cook them up in like butter and salt and pepper, it's easy to get into it if you liked how they tasted.
Nice. This past weekend, I worked at the Earth Day Festival, so we talked about it last week when Katie Meck was on ProMic. Katie Meck was also at the Earth Festival because she had the sustainability table right next to the UMSL biology table. But we had a bunch of birds and other specimens and critters out for kids to come see and touch. And we had a microscope with a fetal chicken on it, or chicken embryo, on it, so kids could kind of come and parents could ask questions and stuff. It was a good time. It was a little cold, I'll admit, more than I would like, so I was kind of shivering in the 50-something degrees with the wind with my one hoodie on. But I did that. And the other thing I need to update the audience on, Marshmallow Madness ended, because I mentioned like 5 weeks ago that Webster, Soren, Raj, and Ray and I all entered a bracket together, and we're like, we're going to see who wins, and the winner is going to get free meal at the restaurant I'm blanking on down the street.
Brewing Company.
Brewing Company, yeah. And Ray won. I got third, so I was a little bitter about that because I thought I would do better.
Well, what critter won?
The great white shark won from March Mammal Madness, if you can believe it, because they started introducing not mammals a couple of years ago. The biggest thing that peeved me was that I was expecting the elephant to go to the final round, and the elephant lost in the first round to a honeybee.
Was it allergic? What happened?
I have to read the description. I think it was something like the elephant got scared after being stung or something, and they ran off the battlefield. It was something kind of ridiculous.
But if the honeybee dies when it stings, And it sacrifices
Maybe it didn't
itself.
die fast enough. The elephant was off the field before.
Yeah, the judges clearly
Jeremy
made
was
the call.
robbed.
I was robbed. I was indeed robbed. The giant squid did pretty well in one of the brackets. So I was happy about that. But no, I didn't do well enough to win. So Ray won. Congratulations, Ray. We were very celebratory and appreciative. But I was a little like, oh, I could have done. I was expecting to do better. But yeah, we'll celebrate at the end of the semester when that when everything's concluded here. All right, Becky Webster, you have anything to share?
Not this week, actually. Okay,
that's fair.
Outside of science.
Yeah, I just kind of did a bump on a log. I guess I went to another plant swap, looked for morels. So yeah, nothing crazy exciting for me.
I have an exciting thing coming up this weekend. It's a big
What is
gala that I'm going to. Coca Cabana. They train underprivileged a lot of underprivileged performing artists in the St. Louis area, and they have their big fundraising gala on Friday. And our jewelry store always donates a piece to the gala, and it's always a big part of the gala. And hopefully we'll raise another $10,000 for that gala this year, and I get to get all dressed up. It's a theme gala, so this year it's prismatic. So I guess dress like you're a prism. I'm not sure.
Something shiny, I guess.
Yes, I got a shiny.
We're gonna have like a
tuxedo blazer,
beam of light
so.
coming through and then coming off with different colors. Like
Well, I'm just gonna wear a shiny tuxedo blazer and call it a day.
That
We'll see
works?
What other people do.
That works. Okay, and with that, thank you so much for listening to another episode of That Science and Nature Show. Thank you, as always, to Becky and Webster for joining me, and thank you to you, John, for coming on as our guest this week. This was fun.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me.
So remember, you can find past episodes of That Science and Nature Show on Spotify and Amazon. Until next week, my name is Jeremy Howard. You've been listening to That Science and Nature Show, and we are out.